Okay, so we are not going to waste any more time. Dr. Bolton? I can see. She's, yeah. I want, sit here, Doctor. You sit here. Sorry? Okay, colleagues, we have to start now. My name is Bikili Porter. I am from Umalusi. I'm a member of the LOC. In terms of the program, we're scheduled to start at exactly 8:30. We have already lost 5 minutes. I am here to make one or two announcements. The first is that those who have not yet registered, during the tea break, we ask you to please make good on that so that we can account for the bills that we pay at this conference. We are regulated by the PFMA. We need to account for every cent that we spend. Secondly, last night we did indicate that our registration desk will be open 7 o'clock this morning. If you haven't gotten an opportunity yet, we are going to make sure that everybody gets registered by lunchtime. Secondly, we reminded people last night that we have a conference app. If you scan the QR code in your conference booklet, you will be able to have it downloaded onto your mobile cell phone. We are using that as a tool to communicate important messages. If there are any changes, we will upload them on the program for the benefit of everybody. We are also appealing with all session chairs to to please ensure that we respect the time allocated. And then finally, I want to introduce us to the chairperson of this morning's session, who is Mr. Dan Odongo. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Uganda National Examinations Board. And he also serves as the member of the Executive Committee of the AEAA, representing the East Africa region. So, Mr. Odongo, I hand the baton over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reporter. Good morning, distinguished delegates. If we are a bit sluggish this morning, it is Dr. Rekomasi to blame, because what he did to us last night. I hope we will be able to catch up on the lost 5 or 6 minutes. I'm not here this morning to talk about what we invented in Livingstone, or was it Victoria Falls, about how we fashion questions to fit the candidates that are taking the questions. So we are not going to talk about describe in detail when we are talking about a beautiful or a handsome candidate. This morning we have 2 keynote presenters, and then we shall have a panel discussion following immediately, as you can see in your program. The first keynote address will be delivered by Dr. Nkosinati Sishi, who is already up here. He is the Director General of the Department of Higher Education and Training in South Africa. He is the accounting authority of the National Skills Fund. He has 38 years of experience at different spheres of government and state-owned enterprises, holding various positions in executive and senior management services in the public service. Dr. Sishi holds a master's degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and a doctorate in philosophy, specializing in management and education from the University of Johannesburg. The critical positions that he has held include Superintendent General, Head of Department, KwaZulu-Natal Department of Education, Deputy Director General, Planning, Policy and Strategy, Chief Director, Educational Measurement, Assessment and Public Examinations. Dr. Sishi was the chairperson and member of various boards, councils, and committees of public entities and intergovernmental organizations, such as Intergovernmental Steering Committee on the National Qualifications Framework, KwaZulu-Natal Examinations Board, Ministerial National Examinations Integrity Committee, Umalusi Council, and Heads of Education Departments Committee. Dr. Sishi's special achievements include Gold Award winner for Best Head of Department in 2015. He's an author of Making Matric, published by the HSRC in 2007. He is also an author of the book From Apartheid to Democracy, which is a prescribed history book, was published in 1997. It's A-level merit awards for excellent leadership, program and project management and administration of the National Examination System in South Africa, 2006 to 2009. I've run out of breath. I have to stop here. Distinguished delegates, if you came with your hands, put them together to welcome Dr. Sishi.
They'll do it for me. Okay. Listening to the program director, I thought for a second that disqualifies me from the task that I'm given this morning. Okay. So thank you very much for the kind words of introduction. I think the main thing about what the program director has said that we must remember is that I'm a teacher. And that's why I'm here today. Please don't ask me when last was I been to a classroom to teach, not to monitor those who are teaching. It's a privilege for us to be here. May I take this opportunity to recognize Umalusi as our host, particularly recognize the work of the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Mafurako Metsi, that has been a pillar of strength in the transformation of education in our country. You continue to make this contribution, and the country benefits from your leadership. There are many people I see in this hall today that I can say something similar to what I'm saying to recall this one day when we converged in one office from different provinces and different regions to now become part of this single system of education. It's important that I start this way so that you can see where I come from with the message that I wish to convey this morning. As a young teacher who grew up to become part of the department, as one of the officials in the area of assessment, our biggest challenge was to establish a single assessment system in the country out of 19 different examination boards of each of those departments that were there at the time. For young officials that are here, I think it's very difficult to imagine what it is I'm talking about. But I trust by the time I finish, you will understand. 19 different departments established for a time, established to serve regional interests, at times also ethnic interests. The schooling system at the time is run by a curricula that was full of racist language that reflected the dominant views of the, that reflected the views of the dominant in society. I remember the first task of establishing or cleaning up the curriculum frameworks that existed so that it served a single system. We call that a syllabi review process. There were syllabus review committees that needed to then pull together all of these curriculum frameworks that were spread throughout the country, running a kind of an education system that was balkanized into regions and ethnic and racial components and so on. So what was important was how do you pull all of this together? I recall a time when, as a young official appointed to be the national head of exams, I walked into a boardroom with 9 provincial heads of departments, newly appointed, who hardly could agree with each other on anything. And I came there to say it's important that we have one single national exam system in the country. There was no policy to support my message. It was just a message by someone who was persuaded by a view that says non-racial, non-sexist, single education and training system was good for the country at the time. The long and short of it is that they agreed, and the mission that I was given was that we will give you five subject areas to set. And if anything were to go wrong, you are personally responsible. If a paper leaks, you are personally responsible. You will be held accountable for it. And I was very happy to take responsibility and say that, give me a chance, we are going to set these papers. And some of the people who were part of that work are seated here, and they are leaders in education in different areas. I can see many of them, and I'm tempted to call them by name, but there's not enough time. Allow me to start my presentation by citing a very interesting quote from Unpopular Essays by Bertrand Russell, which says, "The teacher, like an artist, the philosopher, and the men and women of letters, perform his or her work adequately if he or she can only feel to be an individual directed by an inner creative impulse, not dominated and fettered by an outside authority. I think it's important because I think those days, as a teacher, you had a curriculum and there was a syllabus and there was a thing called a scheme book. And in the scheme book, the scheme book was the basis on which you would be monitored, what it is you teach. But still, under those oppressive conditions of teaching, we managed to pull through, and teachers managed to exercise their inner creative impulse, notwithstanding the being dominated by what Russell suggests its outside authority, which in this regard would be the department's officials that at the time would be looking at ensuring that there's a strict adherence to the syllabus and the curriculum frameworks of the time. Now, I think the essence of our presentation today starts from there to say, whereas it might have been necessary at the time that high-stakes exams are used as an instrument to create a system that is credible, where assessment frameworks that are followed will assist the country to pull together the same standard for all schools, for all former departments that would have followed different standards. The question is, if we still follow the same kind of high stakes and summative assessment systems, is it still serving the purpose? Is it still fit for the purpose? At the end of my presentation, I wish to argue that it's important for us to prioritize training and development for teachers and give teachers the support that they need to be able to facilitate learning that is imaginative and learning that is fit for the purpose, that aligns to the aspirations of thousands of young people flocking into our classrooms. And I will argue, as an official of government, that we've managed over time to create physical access to education in our country. But is this equal to access to quality? And I think it's important for us to make those distinctions as we go on. I also, somewhere in this paper, would like to cite some interesting parallels from Michael Foucault, his 3 axes. He separates the genealogical, the archaeological, as well as the ethical axis. And he argues that policy might have no essence. In other words, the decision on which problem you want to solve, or the decision of a problem that the state decides it wants to solve, might not actually be the problem that, in the view of the teachers, is essential. And therefore, the essence of any policy may have been fabricated by those who are in power. I think if you think about many policies that we've developed over many years, that at implementation actually are proven to be irrelevant and actually insignificant. But you also look at the amount of money that we've spent, developing those policies, and then you say, who actually benefited from all of this investment in education, other than the dominant, in this regard, those who are politically appointed. The archaeological, question that Michael Foucault is raising speak about the givenness of the problem. How did the problem gain the gaze of the state? What is the reason for a particular policy that says, let's focus on high-stakes examinations. Was this in the interest of education, or this was there to serve the views of the dominant in education at the time? I think it's important that I cite this because I'll come back to it later. The last one is the ethical angle, how subjects were constituted by the discourses of power. My argument is that many of us, the views that we express in conferences, in seminars, and in any engagements in education are hardly our own views. These are the views that would have been circulating over time that belongs to others, and in the process, your own voice disappears. And in this regard, I would like to lift the voice of a teacher in the classroom and say, actually, in education, that's the voice that matters. I think someone must assist me with the slides. I'm an old teacher, so I need a duster and yeah, so it's not me. Okay, so I must be, all right, okay. I think it's important that at this stage I also just list the key pillars of the paper, and they are listed as associated sub-themes, speaking to accessibility, credibility, and accountability of assessment, assessing and quality assuring, non-traditional learning experiences. And you can actually associate that with the legacy that we've inherited in the assessment arena. Ensuring assessment data, security, if you were to look at the detail in the setting of a matric exam paper, the amount of money that is spent, the number of people that are appointed to set various examination papers, quality assuring those papers, ensuring that those papers are distributed from one point at national level to the furthest village or exam center in a village or a township in a country. The detail of managing this task versus what we benefit from it is the subject for scrutiny in my presentation today. The partnership strategies for enhancing learning outcomes, the transitioning to digital assessment in high-stakes exams as a proposal, and research and policy for improvement of assessment practices, amongst others, including the role of assessment in improving accountability and quality of education provisioning. The role of assessment in improving accountability and quality education provisioning is well published. It's well, many conferences in assessment would have made reference to it. But this paper seeks to look into, how critical theories, for example, that have characterized, measures as pedagogies of regression, assessment for learning, which has been the potential for allowing learners and students the opportunity to construct their own knowledge creatively and critically, is a point of reference. I think those who are familiar with Vygotsky's ZPD, the zone of potential development, that argues that rather than assessing what the learner is able to do at the time, we should be looking at the potential that the learner has instead. And I think if you like, you can go to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa that speak to freeing the potential of each person. And in my concluding remarks, I would suggest that that is the mandate for education in our country. The conceptual framework speaks of the invincibility, of dominant ideas, that have, tried to channel the, thinking in the classroom, and therefore in the process silenced the voices we have used could be located within the critical discourse analysis, particularly the, flowing from the work of Michael Foucault, as I've indicated earlier. It's also important that we interrogate the issues that, the ZPD, advances. The distance between the actual development level as determined by the independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers, as Vygotsky at the time would have suggested, that the focus should not be on high stakes assessments, but it should be on the potential of the learner. And at the end, I would suggest that if you were to achieve this, it would be impossible if the focus was not the capability of the teacher and the support of the classroom as a way of ensuring that this is achieved. According to Vygotsky, private speech and whispering that learners are engaged in together with their teacher can externalize their thinking, which will lead to higher order thinking. I think the point there is that no matter what power would have done to silence the teachers, teachers always would find a way of teaching beyond what the curriculum frameworks would have dictated to do. Those who taught during my time, when you would not deviate from the syllabus, they know that we still succeeded to speak sense to our learners and contextualize frameworks and align them to those frameworks to the realities that young people were faced with. Many of them have emerged to be the leaders in various areas. They are captains of various industries, notwithstanding the fact that this has been the case. And therefore, our argument in this paper is that let's prioritize the teacher. Let us support the teacher. Let us work with the teacher and ensure that those learners and the learning environment is facilitated in a manner that allows for these young people emerging out of the teaching and learning environment to realize their potential. Towards the end of the paper, I would like to argue that South Africa, as a country that has evolved over time in education, needs to learn a lot from many other countries in the world, and then therefore champion their course in the light of the experiences we have collectively have learned. As a country, we are particularly, focused in our frameworks on human rights over, other values, and it's important that this is done, but without empowering the teacher in ensuring that this is achieved, it is going to be impossible. If South Africa as a country wish to improve the quality of education, there are opportunities that are presented to us by the international conventions that have been signed between the BRICS countries that have created platforms for us to work with our counterparts. It's important for us to provide teachers with opportunities to exchange ideas, to work with their peers across the world, and ensure that the values of education in our country, are achieved in that way. We also argue that examinations and assessments as conducted currently, of course, have improved. If you were to look at how results are released in the country, what you will see is that it becomes a political process. It becomes a competition of which school is better than the other. It becomes a competition of which province is better than the other. And actually, the key educational issues that should be the focus of the educational endeavor are shifted on the side, and what becomes important is that you have performed well in the assessment. Our argument today is going to be saying enough of this. I think it's about time that we begin to look into assessment for learning as a departure point and invest in it. And if you were to do this, you will have to prioritize the teacher. You will have to prioritize teacher education, and you will have to prioritize the learners and learning in that regard. Going back to the 3 axes that we have cited earlier, that the essence of existing policy may have been fabricated, if not, its essence have come to a point where it's no longer needed. The givenness of the problems that might have been cited at a particular time, that problem that would have gained the gaze of the state is no longer relevant today. That, lastly, as we conclude, how the conversations of teachers, have evolved over time, it is clear that it is necessary for us to look at materials that we develop. It is about time that we look at the content of education that is translated to education throughout our country, and work with those in education in ensuring that a better education that is part of our aspiration is achieved. It is important also, as we conclude, to go back to this analogy of a teacher as an artist, of a teacher as a philosopher, that the inner voice, the inner creative and innovative impulse of the teacher needs to be lifted, and we need to reduce outside authority that seek to disrupt the work of a teacher and the professional work of a teacher confronted with thousands of young people in overcrowded classrooms, do all the time. Thank you, Program Director, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sishi. It must have been very frightening when you were told if any of these papers leak, you are going to be personally responsible. To anybody sitting here, a CEO of an exam board, that is a threat, a very serious threat. Thank you so much. You've given us a nice background, and really where you end about investment in the teacher. I think this ties very well with the workshop we had yesterday on competency-based assessment, where the role of the teacher in assessment is so critical. So we thank you very, very much. There will be some gifts to our keynote speakers, and I'd like to invite the LOC, that's handling this. Dr. Sishi has to leave. The length of his CV requires now that he has to be in Parliament in the next few minutes. So we will not hold him. And so, yes, we have the chair of the LOC to present this gift. Thank you so much, Agnes. You fit in the description of one of our items yesterday, where we describe you in detail. Thank you so much. We will allow Dr. Sishi to leave unless you have our next keynote speaker is Dr. Bolton, who is a senior manager research at the South African Qualifications Authority, the entity that oversees the implementation and development of the National Qualifications Framework in South Africa, playing a key role in the coordination of education, training, development, and work in the country. Dr. Bolton conducts, oversees, publishes, and disseminates research that contributes an evidence base for the South African Qualifications Authority work. Our responsibilities include leading and collaborating in South African Qualifications Authority's research partnerships and projects, integrating research into the policy and practice, National Qualifications Framework policy development, and National Qualifications Framework research capacity development. Recent research foci include policy for assessment of quality, recognition of prior learning, credit accumulation and transfer, flexible learning and work pathways, national education and training systems, and professional designation systems, all of which touch on assessment in some form. Previously, she was senior researcher at Umalusi, academic textbook publisher, adult learning facilitator, and teacher in the school and university context. I want to emphasize teacher because Dr. Sishi reminded us that above all is a teacher, and so is Dr. Bolton. Her PhD focused on assessment for success across socio-economic texts. Dr. Bolton is going to speak on overarching policy for quality assessment in South Africa in 30 minutes. Distinguished delegates, I now know you came with your hands, so put them together to welcome Dr. Bolton.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm just going to say all protocol observed because I have a lot of slides. And this has been a very exciting project that I'm going to be presenting. And what was amazing yesterday was when we opened the event and the program director asked everyone to stand, the different countries to stand. And for me, it was like this research coming alive. So I want to just warn you that in the presentation, you might very well recognize your own country's policy, but everything's been anonymized. I see this needs quite a firm press. Oh, that's interesting. There was a slide that went missing, but okay, the slide was the contents. I hope no other slides have gone missing. the contents page. Anyway, I'll start with a brief context, and the previous speaker, Dr. Sishi, actually laid out the context very well. So I'm simply going to show you a picture. And yesterday we also spoke about this in the morning, that South Africa is a place of great inequality. We have the highest Gini coefficient in the world, and I know that other countries in the room have similar issues. Then we have very high unemployment, about 33% officially, and a very high poverty rate as well, 55%. So that's the context. Then another part of the context, so Dr. Sishi spoke about the history of what South Africa inherited on democracy and the tool chosen to integrate this very disparate system with its 19 education departments and so on, and a lot more fractures, was the National Qualifications Framework. And the only reason I'm showing this picture is to show you that there are three sub-frameworks here, one for schooling, 10 levels, one for schooling, then the higher education is the black boxes there, and the red boxes are for occupational or vocational qualifications. And why I'm mentioning that is because when SAQA develops policy, we develop it to speak to the whole system. So overarching policy needs to have those three voices: schooling, higher education, and occupational, vocational. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of slides, but some of them I'm going to whiz through. What I want you to see here is the picture on the right-hand side, which is SAQA policy for designing assessment. And it tries to frame the main dimensions of assessment for all the three contexts, for schooling, for occupational, and higher education. So obviously it's at a very general level, but it does need to frame the other assessment policies in the country, and the reason it does that is to align assessment with the values in the Constitution. So it's about access to learning, it's about being able to progress, not hit dead ends, it's about quality, it's about transparency. So then I'd also like you to see the bottom box there, which lists a little list of policies, and that's SAQA develops these policies. It's basically 8 policies, and I've just highlighted RPL, CAT, and assessment there because that's the focus of today. And we need to update the assessment policy. This policy was developed in 2014, and so the question was, what do we put into the new policy? So what my content slide said was, we were basically asking, we're looking out there in the literature, what does the literature say should be in good education and good assessment policy, and then what do the policies do? So this was what the research was about. I've just said the thing, the research question, what's good policy? So we also looked at literature, and we had different search tags, things like good assessment policy, policy for quality assessment, and others like that. And then secondly, we did a thematic analysis of policies across the world. And we wanted for basic education, general and further, we wanted for higher education, and we wanted for vocational. How did we select the policies to look at? We looked at PEARLs, we looked at TIMS, and we looked at the top achieving countries in different regions because we wanted a representative sample across the world. Then we wanted more African countries, being in Africa ourselves, and we looked at SACMEC for those. Then we looked for schooling systems and the higher achieving countries. So we had a selection there. And then for those countries, we wanted to see the high-ranked universities. This is not the only way to do it, but this is what we followed. And we used the Kakareli-Simmons and the EduRank ranking systems simply because they were easily available. The information was all accessible to us quickly. And we only looked at policies that were in English. Okay, I've said this already. I won't go over it again, or maybe I should. So the PEARLs and TIMS scores above the midpoint were used to select the countries for the world regions, and we used the United Nations geo scheme for the regions. For the SACMEC scores, generated from the mean scores of learners in reading and maths above the midpoint were used to select African countries. So we included all the countries. And then I've said the rest. So we looked for schooling policies in the selected countries, higher education institution policies, overarching vocational education policies, and national policies. And then there are the regions, and there are the number of countries. We have anonymized this. In the initial sample, we had 18 countries, and for 4 policies each at the different levels, national, schooling, higher education, vocational, we expected to find 72. We ended up, I must just say, it's very, very difficult to find country education policies. And I know a researcher shouldn't convey values, but I was shocked that a lot of countries charge to see their policies. So we didn't get any policies that we had to buy or buy to look at. But some were very difficult to find, and entities don't always put the policies on their websites. So we had a team of 8 people searching for 2 months, and we found the policies for 15 countries, and we found 60 policies. And this, no. Okay, let me just go back. I've got too many slides. Okay, I don't know if I should skip no, let me do it. Okay, then I'll come to the result. This is the really exciting part. So let me go to the literature review. We found a lot of literature, and please don't read all the small text. I'm just going to highlight the main things that came out, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone here. So the issue of what assessment is used for, formative, it's used for learning. It's a huge thing. Summative assessments are of learning after it's taken place, and then diagnostic assessments are usually before learning or in the middle of learning a new area. So that was throughout the literature. The role of assessment in learning, we heard a lot about that yesterday, and that also features in the literature. And then the fact that assessment is used for global benchmarking. Then there were commonalities across policies. I'm sorry, there's an extra G there. I don't know where it came from. These are the concepts that really featured across all of the policies. The validity, if you are assessing what you intend to, reliability, which is the replicability, clarity in the policy, clarity of assessment outcomes, transparency, alignment with educational goals is a big one. Inclusivity and fairness is huge, and in the more recent literature. And then there's also a lot of debates around balancing standardization and flexibility. And I think that all countries do both. There's some assessment where teachers have autonomy, schools have autonomy, and then standardized assessments. And lastly, technology and assessment. That's a very under-elaborated area in the literature. We need to look for more. I'm sure there is more, and each of these areas could have a specific search. So I'm not going to go into all of this. I think there are about 6 slides of this. Validity and reliability are absolutely core. And then, of course, there are the debates around what standardization or standardized assessments can cover and what they can't cover. And it's the high order skills and the soft skills which are difficult to measure using standardized assessments. And then there's literature on alternative assessments and so on. Clarity and transparency, that is huge in assessment. People need to know what they're being assessed on. So there's a lot of literature around that. And then alignment with educational goals. Inclusivity is also a more recent thing in the literature that has expanded. And I just need to get to the end of this presentation because the last part shows you examples of good examples that we found. And assessment integrity is a big thing that's emerging now with the use of technology. I'm not going to go more into this detail. in the literature, assessing soft skills, I've mentioned some of these things, challenges with traditional methods, and so on. So I think where we are with soft skills is that everyone agrees they are important, but not necessarily how to assess them. This is too much. Okay, now I'm getting to the part. Okay, so this is the sample that we found. In the first column there, you'll see the 15 countries that we found. And then I hope it's visible, there are 4 columns there. The first column is for overarching policy. The second column is for the schooling policy that we found. The third one is for vocational, and the fourth one is for higher education. And then in each little box for the country, you'll see sometimes we found 3 policies at national level, or we found 2 different higher education institutions, highly ranked. So it wasn't like a one-on-one. And where you see a yellow block, we couldn't find policy. That doesn't mean to say the policy's not there. We couldn't find it. Now, again, I have a lot of slides here. So this is, I think, mostly useful for policy developers. We were interested in, is the assessment policy a standalone, or is it integrated into other policy? And the reason we're interested in this is because policy needs to be easy to use. And you can see at national level there we found it's mostly integrated. At school level, sometimes, and in fact at the other levels, schooling and vocational, it's sometimes standalone, sometimes integrated. In higher education, it is standalone. Then here is a list of the principles, and I'm not going to go through them in detail because these were taken from the literature. And this is what we looked for in the policies. We looked for the presence or the absence of these qualities, just to see what are countries doing out there. And we've coded this one a very bright green, a dark green, if you like, when it's very explicitly in the policy. And if you can infer, they don't mention the word validity, but you can see by the clauses that that's actually what's being spoken about. And then sometimes things were not present. So I'm going to show you one, and then I'm going to show you 4 of these. This is the national policies. Again, on the left-hand column is the countries. So if you look at the rows, each row is a country here. So you can see some countries are all green, and those countries have dealt with all of these elements in the literature. And then if you look at the columns, each column is an assessment principle or an aspect of assessment. So the first column, the first green column running downwards is validity. And you can see all countries touch on that. Second column is reliability. The third column is clarity. The fourth column is transparency. The fifth column is alignment with educational goals. The sixth one is inclusivity. And then the others are newer aspects. And you can see they are not universally covered across the policies. So things like soft skills, technology, contextual relevance, RPL, and things like that. So now I'm just going to skip. That's the national policy. This is schooling. You can have this presentation. Schooling, it's a little bit different. Occupational qualifications, it's different. Higher education, and this is what I want us to look at now. So you can see the differences in the different sectors. Remember, the row is the policy, the country, and then the vertical ones are all the principles. So if you look at national level, there's a good spread of the traditional aspects, if you like validity, reliability, and clarity. And then there's a good sprinkling of the newer things. The same in schooling. And again, if you look across, you can see some countries are ticking all those boxes. Not that I should mention a phrase like that, ticking boxes. Not about that. In the occupational field, you can see there's quite a rich covering of the newer aspects. And in higher education, you can see the traditional aspects. I'm using the word traditional and newer. you can see it's very densely covered across all the higher education institution policies. And the things like flexibility and soft skills are far less covered by all, is not covered by all of them, which was an interesting finding. Then I have a whole lot of slides, about 6 slides, to show where the features, how they occur, how they are distributed. So the left-hand figure here looks at validity. You can see it's in all the sectors. So all of these figures that I've got here, they have a national policy, schooling policy, occupation, vocational policy, and higher education policy. Clarity and transparency, you can see it features more in national policy and in higher education policy. Alignment with education goals is in all the levels. Inclusivity and fairness is in all the levels as well. Standardization, you look on the left-hand side, it's a very strong thing across all the different sectors and the national. Flexibility is less prevalent and least prevalent in the higher education space. Technology, interestingly, was mentioned in national policy, mostly in schooling policy, and yeah, also somewhat in occupational and higher education. And that, I think, this was because some of the policies were not that, some of them were slightly older, and the policy hasn't quite caught up with realities on the ground sometimes. Recognition of prior learning. It's a type of specialized assessment. It's mostly was found in national policies and occupational, vocational policies. And then integrity in assessment was found everywhere in all the sectors, but mostly in higher education. Currency is the relevance of the curriculum and the assessment, how up-to-date it is, and that was highest in the vocational space. Using a variety of assessment types was highest in the schooling space. Okay, now this was the part, I just wonder how I'm doing. I think I am over time already, which is a pity. So now what I'm going to close with, I think I've got 6 good examples of really good policy, and I think some people here, this is where you're going to see your country's policy. There's a bright box at the top right-hand corner of each of these slides, and that's how the country has been coded. So this is country number 12, higher education, policy A. The national policies are denoted with an O for overarching. Vocational is V, and then schooling is S. So the first thing that we found that was a rich finding was how different policies talk about closing the loop in assessment. Some talk about closing the loop into employment and making sure that learners get employment. So in this higher education policy, for example, they encourage students to consider all the learning from their 4 years and then translate it into operational competence that one can use in the workplace. And the assessment is used to help students to transition into work, and the course leaders produce reports on how satisfied are students, how many of them get jobs, and so on. Another way of closing the loop was to improve learning, and in this higher education it was an accreditation requirement, but it's not only compliance, because closing the loop can involve using assessment results to change the curriculum, change pedagogy, change course materials, change academic processes, faculty development, technology, admissions criteria, assessments processes, and outcomes. I don't think I'm going to be going through all my examples, or maybe I'll go through some quickly, but the equity and inclusivity, these were really good examples. So there was one with a policy for a whole school approach to differentiated teaching and learning, where the schools need to have a differentiation strategy, which is about how the teachers draw out the best from every learner. And there's an assessment and moderation hub in this country it's an online hub that all teachers can access resources from, which I don't know if South Africa has that, but it's a very useful thing. Schools must analyze assessment and reporting data to identify diverse learner groups and then teach to these different groups and explicitly accommodate groups. And these are, so we've anonymized this. They actually identify in the policy, in the national policy for schooling, 5 different cultural groups. And the policy says that the schools need to liaise with the traditional bodies in the communities when defining the curriculum and when doing the assessment. They need to work with the traditional bodies. Deaf and hard of hearing learners or parents, deaf parents, that's a category. And then there's a whole lot around language. People for whom language is not a first language, people who've lived in countries that don't have English as a first language, children of migrant people, immigrants, refugee children, humanitarian backgrounds. They mention international students and so on. So they mention them explicitly. Okay, that example is finished now. Right. The second one, a different country. Now, that was the way that country defined inclusivity and those groups. The second country very much elaborated on fairness and flexibility and using those to adjust assessment practices. And here the disability includes physical, intellectual, psychiatric, sensory, neurological, learning disabilities, physical disfigurements, and disease. And then they also defined disadvantage, which is around learners with difficult families, or they don't have support from family, socioeconomic difficulties, disadvantage relating to gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, AIDS, poverty, lack of family support, and discrimination. So this is really elaborated. And I think if anyone has experienced disadvantage or disability, I think I actually cried when I read this policy, because this country is trying to include people. And then the same country, they use reasonable adjustments, and there's a whole list there. Things like maybe giving extra time for assessments, or changing the assessment method, or changing the venue, or using adaptive technology, or changing the assessment materials, like having large font or braille, training the staff, the ordinary staff that must know about inclusivity, and flexible assessment scheduling. And these adjustments must always uphold learners' needs and must never compromise the integrity of learning outcomes. It's always about fairness. Okay, this one I'm not going to go through in detail. It was just, this is an example of good policy for integrity in assessment. So if I was writing a policy on integrity in assessment, I would want to look at this and borrow from it. It goes into detail on all these aspects, and many other policies just touch on it in one little clause, 2 little lines. But this one went into detail, so you can't possibly not understand what integrity is. Okay, I must hurry up now. Types of plagiarism. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let me not. And then technology. Okay, I don't have to go through these, because it was in a good... There was one that elaborated on technology very well, and then aligning, no. Okay, this one, the last one, had a very elaborated context for the policy, which took into account country priorities, continental priorities, global priorities. Too many slides. I wanted to share with you. Okay, so just say that we found in the literature useful things, and we found in the policies very, very useful examples. And yeah, we would be happy to share if anyone wants to know any particular aspect that's elaborated. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. And I apologize about the link.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bolton. Don't worry too much about where the G in policies came from. In my country, we call that random error. Distinguished delegates, you will agree with me, she's done justice to what she had to say. We definitely observe There's a lot of communality in policies across the different countries in the very important areas of validity, reliability, flexibility, standardization, and so on. We still have issues to worry about, like we have done before as assessment agencies on the continent, the issue of assessment of soft skills. That remains a problem that we have to grapple with. Again, Dr. Bolton, you have a gift to be presented to you. Again, Agnes, chair of the LOC. Thank you very much. We have come to the end of the presentations. Now we are going to have panel discussion. And I will cede to the moderator, who is going to be Bernice Daniels. She was the Director of Inclusive and Specialized Education Support in Western Cape Education Department, responsible for inclusive and specialized education support from 2011 to 2023. Prior to that, she had been head of specialized learner and educator support at Metro South Education District, including the portfolio of literacy and numeracy improvement coordination. She's been head of Mitchell's Plain School Clinic, school psychologist at Cape Town School Clinic, Agape Special School, Eros Special School, and an English Science and Guidance High School teacher. Currently, she's a member of the Ministerial Task Force reviewing inclusive education policy in South Africa. She's also a member of the Provincial Western Cape Education Advisory Council. Ms. Daniels is an MSc graduate from Manchester University with a teaching qualification from UCT. May I invite her and the panelists to come and take their seats. And I cede the chair now to Bernice Daniels. Thank you very much. A hand to welcome her and the panelists.
Thank you, Program Director, for that introduction. There are 12 official languages in South Africa, as you heard yesterday. One of the languages is SASL, which is a sign language, and then there are 11 spoken languages. In this province, the Western Cape province, where you are today, there are 3 spoken languages: English, Afrikaans, and Xhosa, and also sign language. So I'm going to greet you in the 4 languages of the province. Good morning, everybody. Goeiemôre. Molweni. That's what I say to you, and you say back to me, because I'm one person, Molo. And then, sign language. Let's greet each other in sign language. Thank you very much to the program organizers for giving us this space this morning. We are going to be talking about reimagining educational assessment in the age of multiple dimensions of learning in a global society, but particularly focusing on those who are differently abled. So greetings to delegates from our continent, Africa, and other parts of the world, all differently abled, neurodiverse, and we are talking about leaving no person behind. That is what we are talking about in all aspects. And I was really pleased to follow the previous presenter who spoke about the efforts that are being made all across the world. So I'm going to start with asking you to remember. So that's a welcome to you from all over the world, abled, disabled, but let's call us all differently abled. I'm going to ask you now, you may close your eyes, I'm going to ask you to remember. Remember your primary school years. And think about who was in your classroom. Did you have differently abled children, classmates in your class? Just think about that for a moment. And how were they included? Okay, so that, and keep that picture in your mind. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened in this country. And for the rest of you, you are going to be thinking about what has happened in your country. Joining me on the stage today are some colleagues and ex-colleagues and learners. And as we go along, I'm going to be introducing them more fully. But for now, to say that from my right-hand side, we have Zola Ndika, who is the program manager in the Western Cape Education Department for School of Skills. Zola. We have Eleanor Bob, who is a psychologist of many kinds, but I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. Eleanor, you can wave at everyone. On my left-hand side, I have Jolene McKerry. She's currently the program manager for Schools for the Deaf and Blind in the Western Cape Education Department. Then we have Chaz Frid Orens, who is retired now, but was the program manager for ICT integration and Schools for the Blind when he was at the Western Cape Education Department. And next to Chaz, we have an ex-learner. She's now at university. Oh, sorry, next to her, we've got the grade 11 learner from the Dominican School for the Deaf. She uses SASL, sign language, as a means of communication. So we have our sign language interpreter sitting in front so that she can follow the proceedings. And then last but not least, on stage, we have Adrian Murray. Adrian Murray has a visual impairment. She's also an ex-learner who is now at university. And then on the corner, we have a learner who is now doing her postgraduate certificate in education. She has cerebral palsy. We struggled to get onto the stage, but she will be participating shortly. And her name is Sonia Jonkers. Welcome to Sonia. All right, so those are our panelists, and you're going to be hearing from all of the panelists as we go along. So the format is going to be, we're going to do presentations, and but in the course of the presentations, we are also going to bring in the learner voices. Okay, all right, so let's do a bit of reflecting on where we are as a country. So the South African journey. Since 1994, South Africa, since 1994, South Africa has, through its constitution, legislation, its policies, guidelines, international declarations and frameworks, committed to building an inclusive education and training system that strives to ensure for every child full participation, access, presence, acceptance, participation, and achievement to aid in the development of a just, equitable, safe, and productive society for the benefit of all. Because it's not only about education. We are trying to build an inclusive society, and it starts at school. So I'm going to just run you through some of the policies and guidelines that guide our work in South Africa. We call it the Big Five. And you know, we talk about the Big Five animals of South Africa, and you see them in the bottom corner. But I'm going to talk to you, just run you through the Big Five policy and guideline documents that we use. So the one that frames what we do is Education White Paper 6, Special Needs Education, subtitled Building an Inclusive Education and Training System. Emanating from that is what we call the SIAS, that's the acronym. It stands for Screening, Identification, Assessment and Support. And you can see that it's a policy that was promulgated by our previous Education Minister, Minister Mochecha, in 2014. And this gives the practical steps that need to be taken to realize inclusive education in this country. Third one, the guidelines to ensure quality education and support in special schools and special school resource centers. South Africa has not gone the full inclusion model. South Africa has gone for a continuum of inclusion in the initial stages of implementation of inclusive education. And so special schools are being converted into special school resource centers that serve the learners with high support needs in the school, but also have an outreach function and serve as resource centers. The guidelines for full-service inclusive schools. As a country, we decided that to cater for learners with moderate support needs, we would develop all schools ultimately into inclusive schools, but along the way, we would have a few schools which would be designated as full-service inclusive schools, would be the model for how all schools should become inclusive. So those are the guidelines for full-service inclusive schools. And we have about 800 such schools in the country, and we hope to expand so that all schools ultimately become inclusive schools. And then the curriculum obviously also has to adapt and change. And we have the guidelines for responding to learner diversity in the classroom in our policy statement, also known as CAPS, the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statement. So those are the guiding documents in our country. So just before I ask our panelists to present, to just re-emphasize, we are trying to have quality education for all in South Africa, and all must mean all. Lamb in 1999 wrote the following, and I love to quote this, because I think sometimes we think that we can exclude half of the children, many of the children, and still have quality education. No. Inclusive education in South Africa, and perhaps elsewhere too, is arguably not something which has to happen in addition to education reform, but it is one of the means through which social and education transformation can be achieved. So let's reimagine. Think of that classroom that you were in primary school, and imagine that all children have been included. And also think of the teachers in that school. What would they have to know or do to make the classroom inclusive? So we're not just talking theoretically today. We want to show you some practical examples. And for that, I'm going to call on my panelists. The first panelist is Eleanor Bubb, and she's entitled her input, Reaching the Essence of the Person Within the Body. And the question she's asking is, did you see me? I asked her to tell us who she is and who she assesses, and this is what she told me. She's got a background in education. She's been a qualified teacher, taught for 12 years. She was an intern at the Educational Aid Center in Gauteng, taught at a clinic school. She has a registration in 3 categories. She's an educational psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and a neuropsychologist. What are the kinds of cases that she deals with as a psychologist? Medico-legal cases, children who've been in motor car accidents, for example, traumatic brain injury, all kinds of disability, neurological injury, psychological trauma, educational psychology assessments for concessions, specific learning disabilities, for placement, and career guidance. And she's also very interested in the brain behavior connection. So at this point, I'm going to give you Eleanor Bubb. Could you give her a round of applause? Thank you.
Thanks. Oopsie. Yeah, thanks. I want to thank you, Berenice, and to Agnes for inviting me to present at this conference that I didn't know even existed. So it's really a great privilege to be here and to deliver and talk to you guys about this. So I now know you exist, and I'm very, very impressed with what you folk are doing. Okay. I'm going to talk very briefly, generally, a little bit about assessment and a little bit about other things, and then give you some examples of how I have assessed, because I want to know what you can do. I'm tired of seeing reports from psychologists, teachers, etc., about what you can't do. I need to know what you can do to help you find yourself. And to do that, I've got to find you. Okay. Did I find you? The question, who did I see when I'm assessing you? And particularly when I start dealing with people with disabilities or learning difficulties. If we look at the process of what is assessment, and this comes from something called Westminster College, which I found on the internet, it says, it is the process of gathering and discussing information from multiple and diverse sources. And the next part is really important. In order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, what they understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experiences. And then we use that information to improve subsequent learning. We don't just say, okay, fine, finished. We just take everybody. Some got 40%, some got 30% to pass, and some got 90%. We almost got to look at what that individual person can do to be able to accommodate them in a general classroom, but also on an individual basis. I taught for 12 years at senior school geography. And I taught children from problem behaviors at Boys Town, Magaliesburg, which was a children's home for problem teenage boys. Average intelligence to above average intelligence. But most of them really struggled at school because of what had happened to them. So I want to know about them. And to take that knowledge, what do we need to do is to help what their trauma was. Not to nail them for their behavior problems all the time. Second part, assessment is the systematic collection, review, and use of information about educational programs undertaken for the purpose of improving student learning and development. I think the court case in the Western Cape was 2012. It was decided that no individual, no human is incapable of learning or is ineducable. And I was very happy with that. Because I've worked with children, I've been on the floor with them, and it's been said they cannot learn, they're ineducable. I've worked with a child with a doctor labeled, told the mother after their birth, your child will be a cabbage. Just keep them clean, feed them, and see they're looked after. We got reaction from her, and she learned. I said to the mother, the child couldn't see. She couldn't hear properly. She couldn't talk. She could hardly move. And I said, if you're going to just pick her up, it's a fright. You pick up our nervous system. If somebody comes and picks you up unexpectedly, you get a shock. Every time she's touched, it's a shock. What I want you to do is when you take her, want to bath her, bring some soap she can smell. And then she knows you're there. You can pick her up and she knows you're going to put her down and then let her touch the water before you put her in the water. So she learns to associate water and the smell of soap with the bath, which something is perhaps pleasurable to her because it's sensation over her whole body. She learned that. Saw the mother 2 weeks later. It was an assessment for a medical legal. And the mother had been really separated from the child because she was told this kid would never react to anything. She says it's starting to get better. And you could see a bit more connection. The mother learned, and the child learned as well. These children are not often catered for in education systems. They're not often assessed. I assessed that child. I wrote a report on her, 60 pages, to see what she could do. So that is assessment, is looking at student learning and improving it and their development. So how do we as educators, psychologists, etc., many of you come from different backgrounds in assessment, assess children who amongst others are considered to be able to do nothing? We can't do anything with them, feed them, do their occupational therapy. Child's blind. Why do we need to teach them something? They can hear us. What's your problem? Are uncooperative, have behavioral difficulties, cause chaos in the classroom, have specific learning difficulties. And the children actually have been betrayed by the education system. We've betrayed them by not giving them the learning they deserve. How do we find out what's happening in their silence, their behavior, their way of communication, their world? How do we enter their world to start to get to know them, the person, the human, connect with their soul, their being? To find out what they'd want to tell us. They're trying what they have learned and we've ignored. How can we use this to facilitate and improve future learning? How can we help prevent them from being lost and left unseen and unheard, unrecognized? How can we be part of them and their journey? All right, I'm going to go through these case studies. I'm going to be talking all back to front and inside out. I've told I've got too much to say, so I'm hurrying. Okay. Let's start with specific learning disabilities. This is in the normal classroom. The kid who comes in has a reading disability, a math disability, spelling, a written word, communication disability, and they get lost. Sometimes they push through. So I see children in grade 5 and we assess them. They can't read. Let's forget about reading comprehension, okay? They actually cannot read, and nobody's noticed. What are we doing to that child? Well, you're starting to destroy their self-esteem. They're probably starting to act out in a classroom or withdrawing totally within themselves. So they become problem children. Their self-esteem plummets, and I've sat with a number of adults in therapy, because I also do clinical therapy. And often men, it's so interesting how it's destroyed them and how they've struggled and are scared to talk out in business with their partners. Their wives shut them down. And you know, women talk much more than men, generally, and faster than men. And your learning disabled person, very often, particularly if there's a language disorder which goes with the reading and the spelling and that, process slower. So we talk so fast that nobody can follow what we're saying, and we expect them to. Okay? And they withdraw because they're not being heard. And they believe they're stupid. Okay? Just because their brain functions a little bit different and is put together somewhat differently. And I've worked with so many children that are learning disabled. I had to diagnose them in my internship. I worked in an educational aid center in Gauteng. And I remember fighting for the one child of average ability, but his reading, and that was below. Nobody had ever done anything. He had failed twice, and he was put into, those days, special education. And I fought and I screamed at the authorities and did everything. And they said, no, you can't do that. And eventually I turned around and I said, you mean I have no choice but to place this child without the help they need? And I was told yes. Okay, that was 40 years ago. I lie, about 34 years ago. I think it's slowly starting to change. The children are left in the classroom, but we need to get the remediation out there, or else we're destroying a large number of children, their self-esteem and where they're going. We need more psychologists in the schools, more counselors who actually understand what they need to be there for. I've had children come and tell me teachers have told them they're stupid. Okay, we need to train teachers as well. And I do believe many of our teachers are traumatized and honestly don't know how to effectively interact sometimes with the children through their own trauma that's unresolved. So they need help as well. This is a biggie of mine, traumatic brain injury. I've worked for many, many years diagnosing children with brain injury. The tragedy is most of these children go back. The neurosurgeon has said, you're a miracle, you're wonderful. We thought you were never going to be able to walk or talk again, and now you're back in the classroom. They go back in, sometimes they do okay for a year, but the rest of that brain now develops on a scaffolding that's no longer as solid as it used to be. So they often fall out in higher grades, and then they again get labeled. Why aren't you working hard enough? Why aren't you trying hard enough? But those areas that should be developing don't develop quite at the level they would have before. So some of the children that have a very severe may fall out easily and others don't. I remember sitting with a child who probably had an IQ of 140 plus before the accident, came in, had an horrific accident, horrific. And we assessed him, and he wasn't bad at all, but his speech was really bad. And I remember doing the feedback, the private assessment to him, and saying, I need to put you in a school where the classes are small, but where you can still get your matric. And he burst into tears and he said, as long as I don't go to a school where I can't get a matric. And I said, no, you can. We put him in the school. His maths mark in grade 11 went into the 90s. That brain must have been incredible before the accident. And he's done okay. Yeah. He will never get the level of education he would have beforehand. Never. I saw just a little girl in grade 2 who had a very bad brain injury, and I had to say to the mom, she's going to do okay now, but when she gets to grade 9, from there on she's going to struggle. The mother was very angry with me and told me I didn't know what I was doing, and 7 years later she came back and said, you were right, there is a problem now. How do I know that? Because there's a major brain development that takes place at around 16, particularly in the frontal lobes with executive functioning, organization, planning, structuring, grade 10, 11, and 12 skills. That's what is needed to pass well at that level. We need to treat those children gently. When it comes to, I assessed another kid who had a very bad brain injury. She was a South African athlete. I've done a number of South African, also sportsmen in other areas that had serious brain injury when they were young. And in the end, they couldn't meet their academic needs, and they couldn't also meet their athletic capacity. I spoke to this young woman, Noah, over this weekend, and I said, what's happening? And she said, and I'm going to use English, she said to me, ek is dom. I'm stupid. I pretend all the time, so I don't mix too much socially that people think I'm normal. She went back, got a matric, she got a university pass. She'll never cope at university, sadly, because if you look at the processing deficits and the memory deficits, she won't cope. And she's struggling socially because she can't follow conversations quick enough. I'm dealing with a person. She sobbed in the interview, which was done on Zoom, because she had never been able to speak to anyone about this, ever. Because she didn't want anybody to think she was stupid and abnormal with a brain injury. I tested a young man who had a very bad brain injury, and his behavior became a major problem because of the area of the brain. And I went into the school and to explain to them, this is how he needs to be treated. He's not being disobedient as such. It's the way this is from the accident at the brain injury. And one of the teachers was even a person I taught with at one point. And they just said to me, really, you don't know what you're talking about. We work with teenagers all the time, and he's just naughty. And he got expelled, but before it actually happened, we got him into a private school where he could be accommodated, and he did all right after that. He went on and studied further. Behavior improved because he was accepted for who he is, not for what he was expected to be. The hardest thing for any brain-injured person is to come to terms with who I was and the new me, because there is a change in who you are. And it's painful and it's hurtful. It's painful for the parents and the individual child because your dreams, your goals disappear. The parent has to adapt to the dreams they had for that child. And that child has to adapt to the dreams they had to become a doctor. And very often there were things they could have done beforehand and is no longer possible. I've sat with children crying in my office afterwards. I've sat very often with parents crying as well. These children are often not seen in the classroom because they look fine. I have an interesting acronym for fine, which I won't go into at the moment. So when I start looking at children like this, I say, and if we can't recognize these children in the classroom, where is that equalness? Where is the integrity? Where is the diversity handling? Are we giving them the education they need? And no, we often not. And they need to be adapted, which is what the new policy is bringing in, which came out in your talk at that one place. We've got to look at children from these backgrounds because they need us and they need you to assess them properly. We want them to be productive. We want them to be safe. All right, hearing impaired, and I'm going to, there's wonderful technology out for children with a hearing impairment at the moment. But what happens is children are in a classroom very often, whether they're hearing impaired or they're actually fully deaf, is that the way they see language, and you're going to get more about that, is different. The way their language has its own grammar structures and often leads to misunderstandings. And what happens is you get a withdrawal as well, particularly if it hasn't been diagnosed. I wear 2 hearing aids. Part of it's a genetic deterioration over time, but one of my ears, there was something weird and wonderful. When the doctors operated, they got all excited. But it made me realize that I switch off in company where there's too big because it's pain and effort to have to try and listen. So you switch off. I've got the hearing aids now, which I'm forced to, but it's lucky it's got a mute on it, so I can switch off at times. Okay. So those children very often in normal school fall behind because they don't have the exposure to language that they should have and the correct type of stimulation, particularly from when they're young. The children that do can go on and move well, but you need to really start the earlier, the better that diagnosis is made. And very often those from birth, you can do an assessment on them to see if they really are, and you need to talk to the audiologist about that. Many years ago, I think when I was at school, everybody had a hearing test and an eye test, just a screening, and I think in grade 1 and 2, and I think that kind of should come back in. Sorry. Okay, we're not here for that, but I'm very opinionated, I'm sorry. A visually impaired child. People say, well, they can hear what's going on. And yes, they can hear what's going on. How much sense can they make of what's been said if they haven't been exposed to that? Because our vision is a sensory organ that brings everything together, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel. It is the integration of all those senses coming in. So, if you buy toys for a child that's blind, and you put them next to the child isn't motivated to move towards it because they don't know it's there. Then they don't know how to play because they can't see. And I saw a little girl, and she was blind from birth or just after birth. And I said to the parents, are there toys? They said, yes. I said, what do you do? No, we put them next to it. Have you shown them how to play? No. Actually, we didn't talk to them even very much or explain anything until they were 7 because we thought they were incapable of understanding. Okay? So we had a child who was severely deprived of necessary stimulation. She went to a school for blind the year late in the year, just before COVID. So when we tested her, and she was brought in for another reason for us to test her, It was so interesting what she had, the moment we took out blocks and she could kind of feel them, she started to do something because that's what she'd learned at school. And she was so excited because she was being stimulated again, because once COVID happened, she went home and that was the end of it. So it's so sad. So children who are visually impaired very, very often have a language deficit. How do you explain to a child the sky? Where's the sky? No, it's far away. What do you mean far away? No, it's up here. Or maybe up there. What is far away if you can't see it? What is rain? It's water falling from the sky. But the water comes from the tap. You've told me that's water. So the explanation of the language starting very young is important. And if we assess children on an IQ test that are hearing or visually impaired, I do not accept the IQ results because there's a good chance that they are underestimation. Just to go back to traumatic brain injury, most children with traumatic brain injury have at least average IQ, sometimes still superior. It's the processing, the working memory, and other areas that are a problem. The IQ actually is meaningless and should never be used. It's the analysis that's different. Actually, IQ should only be used on kids with no problems. Okay, that's all right. Let's go on. Where am I now? Okay, thanks. Mental health. We know that trauma, particularly very early trauma and neglect, changes the brain. In other words, the brain is no longer the same. We know even in adults, and that's why they're looking at veterans coming back from war so much, the brain with trauma changes. PTSD also changes the brain. When we're in that high stressed or trauma situation, the lower brain takes over because I want to survive. And thinking is not going to get me into survival. I go back to lower brain functioning because it works much quicker and it's got a whole lot of things that have happened to me that I can base things on. Many children, not all of them, please don't get me wrong, ADHD is another whole thing on its own. Many children who have severe trauma and neglect present as ADHD, either by being hyperactive or they're inattentive. So what happens? I've got to keep and see when's the next person going to come and make trouble with me. What's that noise? I've got to move. And I'm always looking out. In the classroom, the teacher does this. Are they going to hit me? Not listening. I close down on listening because I'm trying to survive. Okay? I was lecturing to a whole lot of psychologists at one point on from a school for children with special needs. How much time have I got? Whoopsie, 5 minutes, okay. Less than 5 minutes, okay. And what happened there was they were telling me they had a special thing for children, street children, and the psychologist was talking and she did this, and this kid took off, scaled a 6-foot security fence and was gone. The ADD part is I freeze. The freeze response to trauma, I freeze. And I can't hear you, I'm blocked off. And the teacher says, listen to me, I'm talking to you. This child is not listening to me, and they get diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. It's the trauma. Anxiety. I've seen kids with the effect of anxiety on IQ scores in the 80s, in other words, below average, and they are actually achieving above average. So I'm going to stop there, okay? We haven't got into intellectual disability really, or even children with cerebral multiple disabilities, which I gave you an example at the beginning. a child with cerebral palsy who's sitting in my office. The mother doesn't believe the child can understand everything. Mom's sitting behind the child, and I say to her, "Where's your mommy? Look at her." And the child turns very slowly. They process slowly, and she smiles at her mother. And her mother looked at me and said, "I never knew my child knew who I was." Okay, what does it mean for assessment? Arnold Gazelle said, if we use effective tools, the child reveals himself to all who will stop and listen to what he says, and who with seeing eyes will watch what he does. You've got to go to that child. The child cannot come to you. If we look at taking time to listen, observe, and hear and see, the word for autism in Maori, that was given for autism in Maori, means his or her own time and space. If we assess autistic children, we need to take time. One day is not enough. Actually, we always assess children over, well, I do in my practice, over 2 days. First day, the kid kind of gets to know you. The second day, I get what I want from that child because they can trust me at that point, I hope. Children also enter into learned helplessness. If a child is not connected to, people don't recognize when they're trying to tell you something, they turn into their own inner world to provide the stimulation. Some blind children are often labeled as autistic. Why? Because rocking is a nice stimulation. Have you ever tried to rock yourself slowly? It's very calming. They're calming themselves down. They're stimulating themselves because the outside world is boring. Slow. It's actually quite nice. Okay? So when there's no success and people don't connect with them, they retreat into the unseen world, from a world where there's little joy or interacting with others. And we call that learned helplessness. Rumi, hundreds of years ago, said, "Study me as much as you like. You will not know me, for I differ in 100 ways from what you see me to be. Put yourself behind my eyes and see me as I see myself, for I've chosen to dwell in a place you cannot see." It's not normal assessment I'm talking about, what you guys normally looking at. But these children need to be seen, whether it's a brain injury, learning disability, cerebral palsy, blindness, emotional, whatever. Rumi says, "Listen with ears of tolerance, see through the eyes of compassion, speak the language of love." And many children with cerebral palsy, and particularly with spastic quadriplegia, are incorrectly diagnosed with severe or profound intellectual disability when they're not. Many of them are average. Many of them are above average, but because they can't talk and tell us what's happening inside, unless given special equipment, which we're going to hear about, they're gone. So at the end of assessment, can we answer, have you seen my soul? Have you seen me? Do you see my humanness? Do you connect with my inner world? Do you really know what I'm capable of learning? Have your findings and recommendations increased my quality of life and created new space for learning? Does this allow others to see me in my fullness and connect to me? Did you find me? Did you find me? Or did you lose me? And lastly, and I'm going to go away now, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And when we assess, that's what we should be doing. Going outside in that field and connecting. All human learning takes place essentially with connection, the deepest learning. And I hope we can reach a point where the education systems internationally meet the needs of these children. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Eleanor Bubb. She started with a question. Do you see me? And I think you can hear her passion and how she's trying to make a connection with every child that she assesses. We're moving on now. I'm going to ask Chasfred Arends to come to the stage, to the mic. Chasfred is temporarily disabled. He's had a shoulder operation, but I don't think that's affected your voice, Chaz. Okay, so just a little bit about Chaz before he starts speaking. Chaz has a teaching career that spans 42 years. He started as a primary school teacher, then he taught Afrikaans and physical education at a high school. He then worked as a deputy principal and then moved to the Western Cape Education Department in the Kanya IT project for 10 years. This started many years ago. IT is taken for granted now, but when he started there, it was really the beginnings of using IT in education. He served as the Deputy Chief Education Specialist in the WCD Directorate for Inclusive and Specialized Education Support, where he was responsible for ICT integration and also the schools for the blind, hospital schools, and youth care centers. He especially sourced and introduced specialized technology to learners with barriers to learning in schools. He was the one who introduced to the country, I think, the e-Braille notebook, and he'll tell you more about that in a minute. He's retired, but he's still keeping top of his game in the field of ICT integration for those who are differently abled. I give you Mr. Chasfred Arends.
Thank you, Berenice. I can assure you that I booted up this morning. Okay. I'm going to speak to you about those learners that Eleanor told you in depth about, how we can assist them because they have barriers to learning. But how do we know they have a barrier? You know, when a little child enters the schooling system, maybe grade RR or grade R, the teacher sees these 30 kids in the class and they're all the same. You know, they make a noise, they got no discipline, and she must teach them. And after a month, she notices certain ones have challenges in learning. And she screens them and then identifies certain challenges. And she has them assessed. And the reason for the assessment is to determine what support they must get. And that's what Berenice spoke about, the SIAS process. SIAS, screening, identify, assess for support. So we find then that we may discover that a learner at that age need low support. In other words, in the class, the teacher must maybe change the way the teacher teaches, or change the location of the child, or maybe adapt some of the curriculum strategies, maybe assessment strategies, and that's low support that happens in the class. Maybe that is not so successful, then the teacher would enlist the help of the district officials, those professionals. They come in and they can give moderate support. Maybe that child needs higher need support. That's when the child then is referred to a special school. And we have about more than 70 special schools in the Western Cape. And I'm going to tell you about the different barriers. Because the barriers could be classified as cognitive, and you have that list there. Some learners have autism, some have intellectual disabilities, they moderate, severe, specific, and profound disabilities. Then we have the physical and sensory barriers. Find learners who are blind, like Adrian here, learners who are deaf, like Magnesia, and maybe some learners who have cerebral palsy, physically disabled, like Sonia there. And we're going to interview them today after we've discussed that particular barrier that they have. We also have learners who, for some reason or another, due to injury or illness, have to stay in hospital for an extended period. We're going to tell you all about them. Let's start with autism. Many learners who have autism find it very difficult to communicate. You know that, eh? So we've decided, let's introduce the iPad. And we've done that in one of our schools. And there you can see a young learner sitting on the lap of a teacher. And there's somebody from the education department there. And they introduce the learner to the iPad. And there's a little software piece called ProLoQ2Go, which has pictures, and it's got voice audio attached to the pictures. So if you want to say good morning, you click on the picture, and the iPad would say good morning. And if the teacher says, how are you? They would look and click there and say, I'm fine, miss. So the iPad then serves as a mediator for communication. And I can tell you it works. Because that little girlie was introduced, and another boy, Liam, was also introduced to the iPad. And when he was 11 years old, he never spoke to his mom in 11 years because he couldn't articulate what was happening in his brain. But he wanted to say, hello, mommy, I love you. And with the iPad, he got home one day and he pressed and he said, hello, mommy, I love you. Doesn't it touch you? It does, eh? But let's just take it a bit further. I'm going to show you how Liam now is in the classroom and how Liam can engage in a little assessment period of question and answers. Have a listen.
Tashvik, what day is it today? August. It's August, yes. And what day is it?
Today is Tuesday.
Good job.
Yesterday was Monday. Tomorrow will be Wednesday.
Well done, Tashrik. Well done.
Isn't that amazing? Someone who couldn't communicate at all now has a device that acts as a mediator for communication. And he has progressed leaps and bounds after that, so that he now has access to the curriculum, to learning, and he can give an account of himself in the assessment period. But then we have learners who are physically disabled, or they have challenges in motoric movement, and sometimes we find it very difficult for them to access the curriculum, but computing devices, computer technology has given us hope that we can actually assist them to also have access to information. So we add little switches. Sometimes the child just has a straw and has to blow in the straw or suck, and it executes a command on the computer, and they can actually let the computer do things on their behalf. Sometimes we have a little switch here that they just tap with their chin, or they just tap with their elbow, and they activate the computer in that way. But we have found a Rolls Royce. We found a device that if a child is in a wheelchair, completely unable to use any of the limbs, but can only use the eyes, the child can actually access the curriculum, can read, and can type, can use the Microsoft products. We're going to interview Sonia later, that she can tell us how she came through the school with this thing called the Toby Eye Tracker. I find it very difficult to explain the processes, but I've got a little video to show you just what the eye tracker can do. Have a look. There we go.
Eye tracking is a technology that is used to see where a person is looking on a computer screen. The technology can also be used to control a computer. Instead of using a traditional keyboard and mouse, you control it by using your eyes. Illuminators in the eye tracker send out near-infrared light that is reflected by your eyes. A camera registers these reflections, and through filtering and advanced calculations, we can determine where on the screen you are looking, and then place the computer cursor consistently and accurately.
That's very, very interesting. Sonia has been using that technology for a number of years. She came through primary school, high school, university, and that technology has assisted her in some ways. We're going to interview her. Would you like that? Sonia, come closer here. Do we have a roving mic for her? There's a roving mic. Just give her a moment to come closer. There we go. They've got a mic there. Thank you. There we are. Okay, you have to keep the microphone for her. There we are, Sonia. You can stop there. We are so happy that you're with us today. And it's been a great effort, and we say thank you to your dad that came along with you. And Dad has been involved in her life for a long, long time. He acts as a scribe, acts as a reader, helps her with her assistive devices. And let's hear what she says. Tell us about yourself, Sonia.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me. I also didn't know about this conference, but I'm happy to be here. I am Sonia. I am a student from UCT. I'm doing my PGCE, and yeah, I was at Jan Kriel and at Paul School.
Okay, let me tell you what is Jan Kriel and Paul School. Paul School is a school for learners with cerebral palsy and specific learning disabilities. And she has gone there for her primary school career, and she moved to another school called Jan Kriel, where they have the high school component, the FET component for learners with specific learning disabilities and for learners with that are in wheelchairs or have motoric challenges. And tell us about how did you get through high school? Because you can only use your eyes, is that so?
Yes, I can only use my eyes. So when they introduced the eye gaze, it was like a new world for me open. So yeah, I'm really grateful. I used it for multiple things, for my assignments and stuff. And yeah, at school I used it for tasks and stuff, but I couldn't use it in the exams because it's very exhausting to use it, and it's time consuming, so you can't use it in that 3 hours that they gave you. So I had to use a scribe and a reader.
Thank you very much. And did you also then progress? Because we understand that you passed very well in grade 12 and then you opted to study. What did you go study and where did you study?
Yes, I received the Ministerial Special Award in 2020, and then I went to UWC. I started my PA degree there. I finished it in the 3 years, and then I went to UCT, and now I'm there. Things are going great so far.
Very good, very good. Let me tell you what UWC is. It's the University of the Western Cape.
Yes.
And UCT is the University of Cape Town. And she has been there. She's doing a practice teaching at Jan Kriel currently, where she goes back to where she started.
Yeah.
And we are very proud of you, and we thank you that you could come to us today, and we hope everything of the best for the future. She wants to be what would you like to be one day?
Educational psychologist.
Look at that. Thank you, Sonia. And thank you very much, Mr. Jonkers, for accompanying her and supporting her throughout the years. Okay. Okay, you can go back to your dad now. Thanks, I'd like to also tell you, we'd like to add to Sonia's arsenal of technology a software piece. It's a South African, I'm just going to want to go back quickly. Yeah, there we are. It's a software piece that we install, a South African software piece we install on a Windows computer, And let's say you upload a Word document in any one of the 11 languages of South Africa. English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, Sepedi, whatever. Then that text has an audio plug-in that has a human narrated voice, not a computer voice, a human narrated voice that you activate, and it actually reads the text back into the earphones of the child. And it's called the exam portal. I'm going to give you an example of that, but this is what it can do all. There. That is a whole list of things that it can do. It has what we call speech to text or text to speech. When the child gets the question paper, selects the text, activates the audio plugin, and it will read it in that language there. And if the child wants to speak only in Afrikaans and English, it would actually type on the side whatever the child says, and the child can check if it's correct by selecting it and let it read back again. I'm going to give you an example, just give you a little display of Zulu. Bear with me. You see there the text will be selected now. And
Imbali ekuseni bewufinqekile okwesibhakela samandla manje sewuvuleke uthenge okwenhliziyo yentombi ithanda isoka.
We would like to add that to Sonia's arsenal because many learners in the Western Cape apply for a reading accommodations, and some schools have actually bought the software, installed it on the server, and every computer in the school has access to that. So it is assigned to learners who apply for a reading accommodation, and they can use this in assessment periods. That's reading. I'm going to go forward now to Sonia. She's going to try to open a PowerPoint presentation and do a task, and she does this all with her eyes. Excellent, eh? Thank you, Sonia. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. But we also have other barriers. We've got learners who are blind. And let's go to, I just want to forward here. There we go. You know, blindness has two categories. When a child is blind, the child could be partially sighted. In other words, have to come closer or have text enlarged or have some audio with the text on a screen reader. Then the child also has access to the curriculum. But others, again, are dependent on Braille. They lost their sight completely, and they then have to get resources, learning and teaching material in Braille. You know what that entailed a few years ago? Let's say 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, we had to print Braille paper. It was very costly, it was labor intensive, and it was bulky. I'm going to just show you a device here. That's called a Perkins Brailler. It's like a typewriter. You put the vellum paper in there, and you see those knobs in front. Combination of that give you different dots in the 6-dot system, and that makes an indentation in the vellum. If you turn it around, then the blind person can feel it and actually read it. Now imagine 15 kids in the class with a typewriter like that. It is such a racket. It makes such a noise. And then you don't only have one piece of paper. No, you might have 10 pieces of paper for a small little exercise. So we went and we searched. There should be another solution. And we found a device called the Apex Braille Note. There we go. The Apex Braille Note is on the left, and you see the Perkins Braille on the right. You see they have the same big knobs. But if you take a Word or a PDF document on a flash drive, a memory stick, and you plug it into the Apex Braille Note, it immediately makes that reading material available to the child in Braille. And you see that little white dots in front there? The child can then read in Braille what is in their document. If the child decides to answer the question, the child would type on those knobs on top in Braille, like on a Perkins Braille. It would go back to the flash drive and de-brails into Word. We take it and we print it, and anybody can mark it. We were fortunate that the head of education at that time approved that we could buy for each child from grade 4 up to grade 12 in schools for the blind a device like that. And I can say that some of our learners have actually used that to pass matric. I'm going to show you how they work. Remember we said low vision, partially sighted, and learners who are blind. I've got a little video just to show you how the kids engage in it.
If you quit supernova your speech and magnification will reduce magnification button, reduce with in space EA.
We gave them the opportunity to access the curriculum and to engage and give account of themselves in the assessment practices. We're going to interview Adrian. Adrian is from a little town just over the mountain called Worcester. She says it's a lovely little town. But let's ask her. Adrian, very welcome to us today. We're going to give you a microphone again, a roving microphone. Thank you very much. There we go. And I told her I'm going to ask questions, but she can just speak. It's a bit of a communication here. Adrian, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Adrian Murray. I am 20 years old, and I am visually impaired, completely blind, actually. My journey is actually like 18 years old because when I was 2 years old, I was diagnosed with eye cancer. So I luckily still had some vision for quite some time. I went into a mainstream school until I was in first grade, and then my mother said, because she was my teacher, she realized it was going to be very tough for the next teacher to probably try to help me with all my magnifying and enlarging and things. So I learned Braille, and we moved to Worcester.
Yes, excellent. She learned Braille in 4 sessions. And then she became very competent at Braille. She also used the Perkins Braille, you know, the one that you type and make a noise with, eh? And she wanted to take science and mathematics at the School for the Blind, and we didn't have a teacher there. Aiden, tell us about that.
Well, so I had most of my school career at Pioneer School from grade 2 till matric, and in grade 9, I was telling my parents, I'm going to go into science. I need science subjects. I don't like any business subjects. I'm not going to like any of the subjects that's at the school. So my dad started engaging with the department, and they allowed us to have physical science, life science, and pure math at the school.
And tell us, what did the teacher, Mr. Klink, do?
Mr. Klink came out of retirement, actually, I think, to help me out with life sciences. I wasn't, luckily, the only student that was interested in life science. And for physical science, him and I spent a lot of time drawing our own diagrams if something was unclear to me. He used a blind protractor. So it looks like a normal protractor, but instead of a pen at the end, it has a wheel. So it creates indents in the page in order to allow me to feel it tactile on the other side of the page.
Wonderful, eh? But then we introduce Adrian to the Apex Braille note. Let's hear what she says about that.
So I still come from the era where from about grade 2 till 6, I had to carry around a Braille machine and compete noise-wise with other students. And that thing it's still pretty heavy when I think about it. And then grade 7, they gave us an Apex, and that really changed things a lot. It was immediately we got documents instead of 7 volumes for one textbook. And we were able to type out our documents and just send it, put it on a flash drive and give it to our teachers instead of having to give them a stack of pages to read.
And Adrian still has that Apex Braille note. And how do you use that at the university now?
So when I finished matric, I was gifted Apex from Edit Micro for my grades. And I'm currently second year BA student. And I still use it, use the Apex, even though currently it's outdated now. They're starting to run out of parts for it. So I still use my Apex as much as I can to make notes and give documents to my lecturers or things like that.
Excellent. The University of Stellenbosch, where she is, also assists her to use different kinds of technologies, and they have a scribe and a reader for her at times. But she's making great progress. And if you WhatsApp her now, within a minute, you'll get another WhatsApp back quickly. So she's very au fait with using, is it an iPhone?
I do have an iPhone, but most iPhones or Samsung or anything has a speech program, so the iPhone has voiceover.
Thank you very much. Adrian, it was nice to have you here, and all the best for the future with you. Okay?
Thank you.
Then lastly, we have deafness. When a child is born, baby is born, the linguists, the scientists say that the child that's born has what we call a language faculty, an ability in the brain to immediately start learning a language, or maybe even 2 or more languages. So the child then looks up at mommy, mommy says, "Ooh, little one," and the child takes that as a learning curve. Daddy comes and says, "Where's my little one?" And yes, that adds then to the language. And over a few years, about between 2 and 3 years, this little one starts brabbling, making her own words, very peculiar words sometimes to describe things, but imitating the words. And by 6 years old, 5, 6 years old, when the child has to go to school, the child has a language. What we do then as educators, we can use that language to assist them to engage in the curriculum, and they enter the learning process in. But imagine that child is born deaf. There's no audio input. There's no, even if mommy says, "Oh, my little one," there's no input there. So for that first few years, the child has what we call a language delay. Fortunately, we have now embarked in the Western Cape on early identification, and we can identify deafness with the child. But when the child gets to school at 6 years old, 5, 6 years old, you can imagine the challenge now. There is no language that we can use to teach. So we now have to assist that learner, and we assist that learner in various ways. We do an audiogram, and on the audiogram it might indicate that we can do what we call a behind-the-ear device. You can see there on the one side, on the left there. And Magnesia here also has a behind-the-ear device, which amplifies the sound and gives a measure of hearing, especially if they are hard of hearing. But if the audiogram indicates that we cannot use technology or even a cochlear implant which directs the sound from the outer ear into the inner ear and then the impulse into the brain, then the child will be dependent on sign language, as you can see in the picture on the right. So sign language, I am fluent in sign language, and so is my colleague here, and so is Magnesia here, and our signers. We appreciate that you do the service for her. So sign language then is very important. We embarked on a project here in South Africa because we first gave the deaf learner the same question paper like the hearing learner. Now there's a sentence that says, the man walks down the street. You know what that means, eh? But for the deaf it says, the man walks down the street. See, lost in translation. So he said, but that's a disservice to that child that is deaf. We then said that child must then get that same question or that sentence in sign language. So we said, the man walks down the street. Makes sense, eh? Suddenly we said, but now our teachers, we need to retrain our teachers, take them through a sign language course, take them through teaching methods in sign language, develop a curriculum so that they can teach the learners South African Sign Language. And that's what we did. And then we had to teach them how to make little videos, sign language videos of different concepts, and share that to the learners. So we gave each sign language school, we gave them a set of iPads, we used WhatsApp, video, we gave them laptops, and we started a process where they can get information via video in sign language. But then we also started assessing them in that way, and they could then give an account of themselves by signing and recording their answer, and it drops into a folder. Before I get to that, whoops, there. You can see there's a learner sitting, one computer, two screens. On the right-hand side, that screen will sign the question to the child or the learning material, and then he would stop that, he would engage the other one, and he would actually sign the answer into the webcam that's there. And when he's satisfied, he would stop it. It would automatically save in a folder, which the teacher would access later on and assess it there. Let's have a look how it's done. And we've done our grade 12 exams like this. And we've introduced it. It's done all over the country now. Some provinces battle a bit with it. Others have, in the Western Cape, have become quite au fait with it. But we are sharing. We're trying to let every child have access to information and assessment practices like this. So, but we start early. I'm going to go back. There. I'm going to go back to when a child gets to school and we teach them sign language and they have, like Magnesia here, a behind-the-ear device, we introduce an FM system. The teacher has a transmitter around the neck, and when she speaks like I speak now, it transmits in an FM environment what she says. The child has a receiver, and that receiver plays into the behind-the-ear device, and the child can, especially those who are hard of hearing, can then hear what the teacher says. And we've introduced that, especially to the lower grades, to assist them to start with sign language and to have a measure of understanding. We also have what we call a loop system. If you had a behind-the-ear device and I had that, then we put a loop all around the perimeter of this room here. And as you step into that loop and I speak, wherever you sit, you can then hear what I'm saying. And in that way, we've actually assisted the deaf in many ways. So what have we learned this morning? Even a child that lands in hospital, we use technology. And with the advent of Zoom and MS Teams, we can now include that child. Remember, beam me up, Scotty? Remember that, beam me up, Scotty? We can beam that child and put that child in the teacher's class using computer technology like that with a little Wi-Fi, and the child can be part of the learning, although the child might be for a month or 3 months in hospital. So, a number of assistive devices are available. Computing devices are available to assist learners with barriers to learning, especially those with physical and sensory barriers. I have a QR code. If you'd like to scan that, I've got a little Google website with much of this information I have on there. It will take you there and you can copy whatever you want from there. But it was my pleasure to be here. Yeah, it was my pleasure actually also to get Magnesia here. And we're going to interview her now. And you will hear absolute silence. You will just hear me speaking. Magnesia, very welcome. Yeah, stand. Stand.
Hi, everyone. This is my name. I'm spelling out my name. My name is Magnesia. And my surname is Adams. This is my sign name. And the reason why we have a sign name for me specifically is because I have a little bit of a beauty mark on my chin. So in the deaf community, we identify you with features on your face or your physical features. So that's how my sign name was established.
Thank you.
I stay in... I come from Saldanha Bay. And I go to the Dominican School for the Deaf in Witeboma.
And you know, Saldanha Bay is about almost 200 kilometers from Cape Town. And she, on a Friday afternoon, would leave the hostel, go and associate with her family there. And on a Monday morning, I said, why didn't you come back on a Sunday? She says, no, I still want to sleep a bit late. Then on a Monday morning, she comes back with somebody that drives a car and brings it to school. She's in grade 11 now, and she has been part of that introduction of technology into her learning process. Let her tell us, please, Magnesia, tell us about the iPad and the phone that you use.
Yes, so within South African Sign Language, what we would do is, at the beginning of the assessment, we would sit in that little cubicle, and we'd all be separated in a cubicle, as you could see on the video. And we would read the script or the question paper, and when we are done, we would memorize the questions, or I would memorize them, and then I'd see from what specific question I need to answer. Also double check that before I record my answer, I make sure that I'm on the right path. And then also we do have a time frame that we need to follow to complete the exam.
Thank you, Magnesia. She is now in grade 11, but she uses technology completely. She says that you can do a 3-way video conversation on WhatsApp. And I don't think some of us have got to grips with that yet. Is that so? But let's ask her, your future goals. What would you like to do in the future?
I would like to become a social worker because I want to better communicate with the deaf and also establish better technology communication with the deaf.
Thank you. And how would technology assist her going into the future?
I think maybe, for example, having a device for deaf that could help them communicate in all aspects?
Yes, that was a blind question we gave her, or rather a deaf question we gave her. And we are confident that she will use technology and go forward with technology. She has a laptop, but it belongs to the school. She has a phone, and the technology has assisted her to access the curriculum and to give an account of herself. It was our pleasure to show you these few little barriers and how we assisted the learners. And my name is Chaz, and thank you, Berenice, and thank you to Malusi for being here.
Thank you very much to Chaz Orange. I am a Chaz convert, I must tell you. He's converted me to technology. He used to say, "You are like IBM. It's best done manually." But I've been converted, and I know how to use all these new ways of communicating now. Thank you, Chaz. I've learned a lot and know what is out there now to enable the differently abled. So we're going to move on and still on the theme of people and students that have hearing impairments. And I'm going to introduce to you now Jolene McCary. Jolene McCary, this is Jolene. She studied at the University of the Witwatersrand, where she completed a BSc degree and a diploma in education. Later on, she obtained a qualification in specialized education from UNISA. She started teaching in mainstream in the senior and FET phases at various schools, and for the last 27 years was an educator at the Dominican School for the Deaf, where she taught deaf learners with a wide range of abilities and educational needs. She is currently the program manager for schools for learners who are blind and deaf at the Western Cape Education Department. She says she has learned that all children are like flowers, opening their beauty to the world when they are seen and loved for who they are. I give you Jolene McCary.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here, but I'm extremely nervous, so please forgive the errors. I think there was one word that Eleanor used earlier, the word ineducable. And that is how deaf education started here in South Africa. In Cape Town, the city centre, there were children who were not going to school. And one of the nuns at the Catholic church in the area saw these children running around and asked the question, "Why are you not in school?" And the nuns were told, or that specific nun was told, that these children are educable. That is how she decided at that moment, we have to reach out to these children. We have to see how we can support them. And having come from Ireland and having had education there, she knew sign language. But she had Irish sign language. And that is how they started educating the deaf, once they realized that it was deaf children they were dealing with. Today, fortunately, we've gone way beyond that. So let's see what we have in South Africa today. So last year, 2023, we had our president signing South African Sign Language into law as the 12th official language. Okay? But let's just think about a few things before we continue. Firstly, most of our deaf learners at our schools are born in hearing families who speak and know nothing about sign language. So how does that child pick up language? Many of our children come from very poor, impoverished areas. How do we reach out to those learners? The first time they get language, in many cases, is the first moment they step into a school. And they have South African Sign Language taught to them. But when is the first moment you step into school? When you are 6 years old. So from birth until 6, there is absolutely no language. But when you step into school at grade R, you are supposed to start accessing the curriculum, but you've got no language to do so. So this is a question in South Africa in particular. How do we mitigate those ages? How do we support those learners to make sure that by the time they start grade R, there is a language to work with? That is a question we need to deal with. Mr. Arend's Chaz spoke about a language delay. Yes, we fit our learners with hearing aids, but if you ask Magnesia, can I just ask you the question? You have 2 hearing aids, but can you hear speech? Her answer is just a little bit. Not enough speech to have a conversation, not enough speech to understand. And even in the spoken, when the words they do hear, sometimes things are misheard. So that is why there is this language delay that we have, which then affects all their learning in school. Right, so now we have South African Sign Language, which has now been instituted. Right. South African Sign Language is seen as the home language, but at home the family speaks English, Afrikaans, isiXhosa. Who's practicing? Who's helping them and supporting them at home? In addition to that, they still live in an oral society, oral communities. Who is supporting them there, and how do we bridge that gap? Those are the questions we need to answer. So, moving on. Okay. Okay, so when I started at the school, we had, maybe to go back a bit in history, we had the sign language, and then the education department, in its wisdom, decided to stop sign language, and oralism was going to be the way to go. However, by that time I started at the school, we had what we call total communication. Okay? What does total communication mean? It means you are speaking as you are teaching, and you are signing at the same time. Not South African Sign Language, we didn't have that then. It was just signs, regional signs that each school had, very different to the other. So understanding between schools could have been very difficult. Okay. Then in 2011, we had the pilot of SASL at Delabat School, which is in Worcester. After that pilot, it was obviously tested and it was seen that it could be beneficial. So we had the training of the educators in 2014. In 2016, we had the first class to offer South African Sign Language in grade 9. And again, it was a pilot. Our first SASL exam was in 2019. And that was those first learners who started in 2016 who did that exam. We have come so far now that in 2023, SASL was an official language recognized across the country, and all our learners really rejoiced when they understood that their language is now recognized and it's part of South African law. Okay, I'll go very quickly. So that is the progress that we have in deaf education. So there's been a lot of progress thus far, but there are quite a few challenges. Okay? I'm just going through South African Sign Language and comparing it with the oral languages. Sorry, just to go back. So you can see that there is a comparison between South African Sign Language as a home language and the oral languages. It's just that it is a visual language and the others are oral languages. Those are the assessments that can be included in South African Sign Language, storytelling, prepared, unprepared, interviews, etc. Very similar to what is offered in the spoken languages. This you saw earlier, as Mr. Orenz explained, and you saw the video. This is just how the SASL exams are recorded. The adaptations for our deaf learners, those are the adaptations. Here I just would like to stop and say that when we are dealing with the content subjects, not SASL, the other subjects, they write exactly the same exam as all the mainstream learners. And that does pose its own challenge, because if you are offering South African Sign Language as a home language, but your other subjects are done, but your spoken language is on a first additional language, those exams that they are doing are all on home language level. Now, your level is first additional as a signing person, but you are compelled to write your other exams at home language level. Can we see the challenge that lies ahead and the issues that our deaf learners face? There are the challenges as well, but I've mentioned a few of them. And just to say that we have come so far, we have progressed in deaf education specifically, but there still is a long road to go to support our deaf learners. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Jolene. I think our new Miss South Africa is certainly going to popularize sign language and also just more attention to those who are differently abled. I think this year of a reign is going to have many benefits for inclusion. Last but not least, we have Mr. Zola Mdika. Let me quickly tell you, he's a teacher, graduated from the University of the Western Cape with a BA and a teaching diploma. He started in mainstream schools and in 2010 started working at a school of skills. This year, he's been permanently appointed as the program manager for schools of skills in the Western Cape Education Department. I give you Zola Mdika.
Thank you, Mrs. Daniels. To all protocol observed, which I shall take you with me to this graveyard shift presentation. I've got approximately about 6 minutes or 5 minutes to be precise. Colleagues, I will be presenting to you our School of Skills assessment program. Just to give a bit of a background, and I must state the fact that it is an honor to share this platform today, because when you deal with the School of Skills, we are often asked questions as to who are you and what is it that you are doing, to be specific, in your program. It is a 4-year program, colleagues, that runs from year 1 to year 4. We are dealing with the learners with MMID, that is your moderate to mild intellectual disability learners. I must also state and take this opportunity to mention the fact that among the inquiries that we often get is an issue of qualification. That is now an accreditation. So I thought that by the time I was offered this opportunity to be part of this Umalusi conference, because our response to parents will say the process is still within Umalusi. We are waiting for the response. So I'm sure by the end of this conference, I will be directed to the right person that will give feedback. Colleagues, South Africa has introduced a 3-stream model, as we know, that is focusing on your academic, that is your normal curriculum that most of us have attended, that is your normal grade R to grade 12. And then we've got also the vocational stream, that will be your technical high schools, which where learners will choose from grade 10 to 12 specific subjects that are specifically for vocational curriculum. And then later on also the occupational stream was introduced, and here in South Africa, our occupational stream, the piloting started in 2017. And then with your 3-stream model, when it was introduced into our mainstream schools from 2021, they are still piloting up until 2026. Those are your streams, as you can see, and I must state the fact that, colleagues, onto your occupational stream, you've got different domains. As you can see there, you've got your SOS, that is the core. For instance, here in the province, we've got 27 SOS schools that are implementing the the occupational stream curriculum. And then there are quite few of our colleagues as well that are incorporating into their own stream the occupational curriculum to cater for the learner needs. Those are your subjects that you will find as the core subject for your vocational stream, where learners are able to choose between engineering, graphic designs, up to your technical mathematics, and also your technical sciences. That's a variety of subjects that you get into our stream as an occupational stream, which mostly are made of electives. For instance, here in Western Cape, we are offering an opportunity to our schools to 21 of our occupational subjects that are electives. And then what happens, colleagues, the school has an opportunity, according to the infrastructure and the resources that they have, to choose between those subjects that you can see there in order to cater for the learners. I must say you will find that there are quite few that are prominent into our sector, such as your welding, your hospitality, your hairdressing. It's quite a variety of subjects, as you can see, colleagues, from the screen. That is a proposed model that was designed in order to cater for all spheres of our education system. As you can see, ours falls on level 1. That is what we envisage to get for our learners. And then from level 1, and then they can get an accreditation from the quality and insurance that is responsible for the trade and the occupational qualification. Then they will move from there to your world of work. The SOS placement, colleagues, I must say that is the most challenging factor for our learners due to the high demand. From the applications that we get, you'll find out that most of the time we are only able to place only 40%, 40 to 50% of those applications. And then in order for a learner to be placed into our program, they need to have been ensured that a CS protocol has been observed, as our colleagues have indicated. So those learners that we place there are the learners that has high level of need of support, learners that are not coping with your mainstream curriculum, and of course they should have been indicating or showing an aptitude skills as an interest. And then our curriculum, colleagues, is similar to your mainstream. That is your 27.5 hours, but the difference is hours split into two with a 50%. That is meant for your general subject, that your normal academic subject, and your 50% that is dedicated into the electives, where a learner from year one, they need to be exposed into a minimum of 3 subjects, that is your electives, where they will make a choice from year 2 to year 4, where they will have 1 elective as their choice. In terms of your academic colleagues, in terms of your academic, in terms of your academic subjects, is the same manner as in your mainstream. Is the same manner as in your mainstream. I lost track now, Mr. Daniels. Sorry, colleagues. I'm trying to speed up. They still do your basic mathematics. They still do your basic home language. And then also we've got the life skills, which is an anchor of EMS, life orientation, and the social sciences. They also still do your natural science as one of the subjects. That is also, so we still, as much as we know, these are the learners that are performing at a mild level, but they still need to be exposed in order for them to express themselves as they are busy with the world of work, as they are doing the measurements in their workshops, as they are engaging for the interviews to express themselves. Hence, they also need to acquire a certain level of language skills. I must also mention, lastly, colleagues, that we are also part of the GEC that is being piloted. So our schools got an opportunity, as this is the final year for the piloting of the GEC, in order for our learners to get a form of a qualification or a certificate that is recognized as they live and they proceed into the world of work. And I must mention the fact that we've got quite few of good stories in terms of our learners. Some who have been placed and become successful in terms of the FET, who managed to get the national diplomas, and we've got quite few of them who also managed to attain the job security. Some of them are professional chefs and are working in your normal industry, like in other learners. Those are some of the activities that our learners do into our workshop. As you can see, they are very much independent. They produce, as it was mentioned here by the president of our association, Dr. David Njengere, that each and every learner has a potential. So as we are reimagining the assessment model for our education system, I think our sector is doing that, precisely that. That is the last slide or image where one of our learners are showing art, and the last one is in welding. That is the products and the items that they've developed themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Zola. Zola, you really were very quick, but I think people got the sense of that third stream, the occupational stream that is being offered in our schools now. So we were going to leave some time for questions and comments, but I think that unfortunately time has caught up with us this afternoon. I think all of us will just stay in front, so if there are particular people that you want to speak to, please feel free, and we'll be around for a whole day, so please call us if you want to ask questions. So this morning you imagined, I asked you to reimagine. Can you just take a moment and think, if all of this was available at the time when you were in primary school, I think it would have been a very much more inclusive schooling environment. And I think that's where we want to get to. We're not there yet. It has taken us more than 20 years from the promulgation of our policy in 2001. And we've really just begun that journey. In 2001, when the White Paper 6 was released, the then Minister of Education, the late Professor Kada Asmal, had this to say: I acknowledge that building an inclusive education and training system will not be easy. What will be required of us all, and that means you all too, what will be required of us all is persistence, commitment, coordination, support, monitoring, evaluation, follow-up, and leadership. So what is the current situation in our country? In the white paper, it stated that it be a 20-year first implementation period of inclusive education from 2001 to 2021, after which we'll review whether the policy is appropriate, whether it's being implemented in our country. Then COVID hit. But I want to tell you that last year in 2023, the minister announced the formation of a national task team to review the inclusive education policy. I'm one of the members of that team. We've just completed a situational analysis, and we're in the process now of reimagining education that is inclusive. Not education with inclusive education on the side, but that the whole education system is inclusive. And what I've heard so far in this conference, I think that is something that we are all striving towards. So I just want to compliment all of you who are part of the gathering here, and just to encourage you to continue, as Professor Asmal has said. So there's been an establishment of an interbranch, interdepartmental and intersectoral task team to drive the review and development of the envisaged basic education, inclusive education policy. That will be developed and then approved, and a roadmap set for this country, and then there will be a plan to make sure that everybody knows what is supposed to happen, because I think that's been part of the problem. There's not been enough advocacy and communication. I hope that today, I've tried to put together quite a diverse panel, and I hope that you get a sense of what is possible. And that helps you to reimagine an education that is inclusive. So, in the 4 languages of the province, thank you, dankie, enkos, and then in sign language, thank you.
Distinguished delegates, I can't say much more. This has been an extremely engaging session. I wish we had 2 more hours. I'm going away with this statement: no human is uneducable. And perhaps now we have to add, no human is inaccessible, or no human is unexaminable as examining or assessment agencies. Last year, those who attended the 39th conference in Nairobi will recall that the organizers of the conference brought to us a marathon runner, a musician, a rugby player, and they challenged us as assessment and examination agencies: how do you assess me as a marathon runner? We have these wonderful learners that have been brought. Are our systems equipped to assess them adequately? Do we have enough support in our classrooms, the teachers, who are able to identify learners that may have some difficulties and are able to give the kind of support that they require? Listening to Elena, I think I now know what happened to my mathematics. When I was in grade 8, we had this teacher who was teaching us the maths. And he had a meter rule that was as wide as my palm now, not at that time, my palm now, quite wide. And the first things he did was to start what he called mental arithmetic. So with this long meter rule held in such a way that the edge was facing me. I used to be a small kid and I was always in front. The small ones were arranged to sit in front. So you would go 2 times 2 times 2 plus 3 plus 4 minus this, then it would hit. It would hit the nearest, he would hit the nearest kid. And that's meter rule quite often fell on my shoulders. And so when he started 2 times 2, I wasn't thinking about the 2 times 2, but I was worried about where the meter rule was going to land. So when I heard us speak about teachers who may have their traumas and so on and so forth, and by the way, it affected my learning of mathematics. Now I know what happened. Distinguished delegates, this panel requires a standing ovation for the wonderful Thank you very much. May I invite Becky to make some administrative announcements. Thank you so much. I'm a very modest chair. I usually don't ask to be applauded, but in case you think I should be.
Thank you, Mr. Odongo. 2 announcements quickly. We are aware that some of us have not registered yet. During the tea break, we asked that you visit the registration desk. And before I make the last announcement, Mr. Ndika, Umalusi is used to being blamed for everything. In the country, we have a problem of scammers selling fake certificates, and they take people's money and say, we're still waiting for Umalusi to print, when they know that Umalusi does not print fake certificates. Thank you. So the second announcement is that we request that the CEOs of the Examination Council remain and they come and occupy the front row. There's just a small announcement to make. And the countries that have not yet given us the songs to be sung or to be played this evening, please do see us to make good on that. Thank you very much. And then we ask that we start the next session at exactly 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.